This is the voice of Bob. Latest news from Silicon Valley. Of course, we're talking about Google and their brand new spanking class action lawsuit from none other than James Damore. We'll get that cleaned up in post. Apparently, the powers that be discovered that in their first opening filing, that it's basically a cult. And this is something that yours truly actually has some personal experience with. You see, yours truly spent the better part of the previous decade working in the Silicon Valley culture. But cult is the more appropriate. Basically, what you're looking at is a whole mishmash of pseudo-legends, people chasing success as it was previously done by other people, which is virtually impossible because the circumstances of one company's success or a group's success cannot be replicated by another person. There's just too many random probabilities. So there's really no way to capture lightning in a bottle twice. But they keep trying. That's why 9 out of 10 companies fail. But they're always chasing that magic unicorn. A unicorn, of course, in Silicon Valley terms, is one company that has $1 billion in valuation. It used to be just going public. Going public was basically a non-starter. Didn't matter if you made money or not. In fact, sometimes they preferred if you didn't. It would be one way to go ahead and say that we were spending as much money as possible expanding ourselves, expanding the group, getting more eyeballs, getting more participation, throwing as much money at as many consultants as possible, sometimes with kickbacks. Yes, that actually happened. Cash and dash, quite common during .com 1.0, and it's probably quite common right now. Because basically the people who are currently doing Silicon Valley are doing things like selling their pre-IPOs, their founders' shares on an individual black box exchange and cashing out just ahead of the curve. However, the thing that's really driving the cult of Silicon Valley isn't just the lore, the legends, the dangling of easy money, the kind of stuff that used to be attributed to Hollywood. No, it's basically a youth culture, sort of like Logan's Run meets Lord of the Flies. You see, actually, you have very little chance of getting hired in Silicon Valley if you're over the age of 30. If you're over the age of 40, forget it. You're not getting in there. And then what that does is it creates a culture of vapid, enthusiastic inexperience. On one hand, they're willing to try some really radical ideas, and sometimes some of those ideas provide really neat companies. But it also creates a culture that's basically bordering on Jonestown, because you're going to have one person, usually a guy, who's going to go ahead and say, this is what we're going to do. We're going to change the world. We're going to make a dent in the universe because that other guy said the exact same thing and he made a lot of money, so I'm going to say that too. The thing that's interesting, or as the progressives say, problematic, is that for all the virtue signaling, and they're not actually diverse at all. It's not just age, by the way. Age is the least of their problems. It's the incestuous hiring practice. It's very widespread in the Valley. They hire their friends. Now, this isn't uncommon. There's a lot of businesses. In the old days, they called it the old boy network. Well, I guess here you'd call it the young boy network. But here, it's even more restrictive. Berkeley considers itself part of the Silicon Valley scene because they're within the orbit of the tech business that makes up Northern California. But in fact, most of the action is in Stanford. And the reason for that is Stanford is literally right on the front row of more than 66% of all private equity and venture capital in the United States. And that's located right next door to Stanford. That's on Sand Hill Road. Sand Hill Road is the dividing line between Palo Alto and Menlo Park. And what you find there is a lot of people who are just basically chasing after as much options for putting money into businesses as possible. They have to. If the money invested isn't spent, then they don't get their 2% cut. So the company doesn't make any money. Since there aren't that many good companies to invest in, they're going to go balls to the wall and spend as much money as possible with these companies. So when these companies get their initial investment rounds, Series A, Series B, they think, oh, we're so smart. We got millions of dollars thrown at us because we're smart, which leads to smugness. Smugness leads to all sorts of weird things. But primarily, they just hire their friends. And the group's pretty small. These startups generally stick around the 12 to 24 head count. And I know, I've worked with large Silicon Valley companies and startups. In the latter part of the previous decade, I concentrated on startups. I could work 3 or 4 startups a day. All I had to do was just basically go from office to office and get my assignment, and then I could work on-site or off-site. My choice. And there was basically a very sameness to each one of the offices. They didn't have a whole lot of women. They signal that they're really big on that. And Google right now is doing some very strange things in that regard. But when the companies start, they're highly exclusionary. They're not hiring a lot of women. They're not hiring any blacks. Someone from Oakland? Never going to happen. They're not part. If they actually have to disclose their head counts and hiring counts publicly as a publicly traded company, sometimes, diversity reports and whatnot, they might pack a few in. And they sure go ahead and make sure they're on camera when the PR photos come out. Basically, no, it's not diverse. It's probably the least diverse it's ever been. Back in the 70s and 80s, there was such a lack of manpower. Video games was just getting started. There weren't a lot of people who knew how to do this. So they'd take anyone who knew how to do this, who could bang out an Atari game, they'd bring him in. A woman did Centipede. Crazy older people, older coders, would pick up the keyboard and mash out some phenomenal stuff that you probably grew up on if you're over 40. Or if you're just into retro games, one of the two. That started to change in the late 90s because more and more people chased after the gold rush. And once that happened, there was more applicants. So there's no reason to take everyone. They could take their friends, their demographics, the young, white, sometimes Asian males. Nothing wrong with being one of those things. But what they're telling you right now, if you're a white guy on Twitter, you're bottom rung. But when they got started, that's all they were. When Facebook says we're virtue signaling and saying we're wonderful and inclusionary, we won't tolerate hate speech. We won't tolerate conservatives. We won't tolerate Trump voters. They didn't start that way. They're still barely that way. If you look at the actual company records, you're going to find less than 10% of that company is made up by any sort of diversity. If you talk about age, you're going to find that there's almost nobody over 40. There's absolutely no one over 50. It is like Logan's Run. So, what else do you get from this? A massive amount of smugness. We got young kids, first job out of college, because they're cheaper, and they'll put up with a lot of lifestyle bullshit. They make it sound wonderful by saying, hey, we got free beer and cafeterias and all these wonderful things. But guess what? That's to basically keep your ass in the chair. That's to keep you from going outside, talking to other companies, other people, finding out that there's a life outside of the company you just got shanghaied into. So it becomes insulatory. Highly insulatory. And that creates groupthink. And that creates a bubble reality.
It's really cool. It was like really kind of a space age experience.
There's nothing that makes you feel the least bit threatened.
This is a first step for us. The opportunity for people to just move around and not worry about it, it's going to be incredibly empowering and incredibly powerful for people.
So anyway, the diversity posture and virtue signaling is all basically to keep the feds off their back. Because if they found out that their hiring was not what they say it is. If they got audited, it could collapse the whole reality distortion field, as it was called to Steve Jobs. But it's still running. Everybody likes to emulate their champions, their favorites. So they continue to do it. The VCs don't give millions of dollars to women. They just don't. People like Dan Lyons, former writer of Newsweek, former fake Steve Jobs, has a phenomenal book about the entire culture. And it confirms everything I knew 15 years ago when I got into it. I've been in tech in some form since 1990, 1993. Oh, did I mention I'm a little old? Because, boy, once you realize where you are and the people you work with and what they think of as people who are older, you don't want to be around them. Forget hostile work environment. They don't want you there. If you're white and you're male, now at Google, they will actually boo you going into the room. If there's a all hands on deck meeting, they will actually boo you going into the room. They're out for blood, especially after the election. Oh my God. Cognitive dissonance. If you're not aware what that is, please check out Scott Adams. He's got a daily Periscope that's basically crack. It's like crack cocaine. So check that out. Anyway, regardless where you think diversity hiring is bunk or affirmative action is inherently racist, there's arguments for that. I can understand. When you do skew your demographics along one line, unintentionally or intentionally, depending on how you want to do it, you're just going to get a bunch of people agreeing with management, with the founders, with everyone else. No one's going to challenge them. No one's going to come from outside the box. Oh, they love their buzzwords. That's not even really a buzzword. It's just a catchphrase, but they're fueled by buzzwords. It hasn't changed much. Back in my day, instead of PowerPoint, they still send things out like flyers and printed material. And I had one from an online auction company that was positioning itself for the commercial market, not the consumer market. So they weren't going to be eBay. They were going to be eBay for copper, eBay for wood, steel, massive block trades of commodities. But if you read the brochure, you wouldn't know that. It was just a pile of buzzwords. Absolutely filled with buzzwords. So anytime I look at a PowerPoint deck, I like to count the buzzwords. Because the higher the buzzword count, the more bullshit there is. Conversely, they're probably getting a lot of money. Bullshit works. We'll be right back.
Boom! Hey, it's Ted from Monster Cocks! You want a fat, greasy cock in your mouth? Come down to Monster Cocks today! We got a 2-for-1 on cock and balls! Stuntless! Sponsored by Monster Cocks! Boom, boom, boom! Fuck! Are you gagging for cock? Head on down to Monster Cocks for our 2 p.m. cock o'clock deal. Stick a cock in your whole family. Monster Cocks finally endorses his big budget birthday! Shit!
I also worked in advertising, so the investors, they do all right. Before they go public with an IPO, there's enough machinations behind the scenes that they will get their money out. They're fine. The founders, they're also fine. They're usually first in line. Bit of a pyramid-type scheme. They do great. But here's the thing. Well, who gets screwed? Investors don't get screwed. People who put their money in, they're fine. It's a private black box. No regulation. But they're fine. Don't you worry. The ones who are screwed 6 away from Sunday are usually employees. They're told, we want you to put in more hours than a truck driver on meth. We want you in the office 50, 60, 80 hours a week. It's like the people clapping for Stalin. The first one who stops clapping, he's underperforming. You're out. But if you shower, eschew bathing habits at home, eschew dinner, don't have kids, Heaven forbid you get married. That'll screw everything up. Stay single, stay stupid, and stay at your desk. And you'll be just fine. We took care of you. We gave you all those stock options. Aren't those great? Once they vest, you'll be on easy street. Unless the stock pops only in the first week and then slides off the deep end. In which case, it may go up from, say, an IPO of 25 pops to 30, 40, $50 a share. Then once everyone's taken their equity off the plate, it crashes down to 18, 15, 12. Now here's the thing. The employees' vested shares are equivalent to the first price when the actual shares hit the market. And this is where it gets fun. Because you think, they're just worthless. It's less than worthless. This is where it gets really nasty. If you want to, I'm not an accountant or anything, but I'm aware of the process because I was there. So let's just say, $15 a share, 10,000 shares. I'd like to buy a car. Tired of taking the shuttle bus. Caltrain gets really old. Yeah, I want a car. I'll still be stuck on the 101 and I won't go anywhere. But I'm going to get a car. Not a fancy one, maybe 15 to 20K. Now, here's what you discover. Yeah, you can sell those shares, but you're taxed at the launch price. So yeah, you may be cashing your shares out at $15 a share, but your tax liability is 25, 30, 40, depends how inflated it got, because there's like usually an initial price announced, and then the investors go, yeah, we need to bump it up a bit. We need to make sure we cover the spread. So they bump it up. And that's your tax liability. You're paying taxes on the launch price, not the $15. There's been occasions where someone cashed out 5,000 shares and found themselves in debt to the IRS. They didn't cash out shit. They basically graduated into tax delinquency. And oh boy. Anyway, so the employers are screwed, which might explain the culture at Google. They've really got to shield the employees from reality because they might, again, leave the company, discover there's non-cult employers to work for. So they get more women to berate the employees, to tell them that women are pissed, that capitalism might even be bad because they're supporting Antifa, which explains the censorship. Here's a challenge. Type in Hillary Clinton is. Now, I want you to do it on 3 services. I want you to do it on Google. I want you to do it on DuckDuckGo.com. And I want you to do it on Bing. Take a look at those results. Now, if they're doing that with Hillary Clinton, what else are they doing? Quite a lot. And so are a lot of the other companies in that area because they're now afraid that nearly half of America isn't thinking like they want you to think. They will do censorship on Twitter. They will do censorship on Facebook. They're really going to censor you on Reddit. That's why the Donald is this strange little enclave. They make a lot of money off the traffic. It's the second highest traffic indicator, possibly the highest. It depends. The numbers aren't accurate. They have one set of numbers for the advertisers and one metrics for everyone else. So it's a bit of a guessing game, but from the average traffic load, the average amount of comments coming in, we kind of know that the Trump supporters are pretty busy little beavers. And boy, this drives Reddit nuts because they're making money. They don't know why they're making money. but they let it go anyway. Because they're in a ghetto. They're a safe space in reverse. You know, they got the bricks and mortar and barbed wire. Occasionally come in and edit comments. That's how that works. Google has targeted the Donald. Twitter has targeted the Donald. Facebook has targeted the Donald. And obviously, Spez is targeting the Donald. He's even gone there and actually rewrote and edited posts. What if he actually said something like, I'm doing a drug deal. I want to meet someone for a drug deal. Except the member of Reddit didn't say that. Spez did, using that other person's account. He can do that. Not that I'm trying to give him any ideas. I'm sure he's thought of it. Because if I can think of it, you know he can. And all of this is why it's a bubble. And not just because it's an inflammatory cult environment of progressives, people really pissed off that their candidate didn't win. It's great to have democracy until you lose. And then you want everything your way. And you take it out on your audience. We've seen that in Hollywood. They're actually attacking their audience in Hollywood. The same thing in Silicon Valley. They got billions of users. They don't care about you. You're just one. Maybe you would have been important in the first 3 months, first year. Now? No. That's why I always say, try getting off of Facebook. Try getting off Twitter. You might find yourself being a lot happier. Because it's nice not being bombarded with assholes you didn't really want to talk to 10 years ago. You sure don't want to talk to them now. But there they are. Their photos of their kids, their pets. Minutia. It's really not that interesting. Think of yearbooks. They were fun to have that first week. You know, you got the signatures in them. It was kind of funny to see some of the terrible photos. But after that, it wasn't really that important, was it? It went right into the bottom of the closet. Well, Facebook is like a yearbook that never ends. Why is that appealing? I have no idea. And as far as Twitter is concerned, it's basically a platform, the most efficient technological platform to get fired or lose your political career or be destroyed, be harassed. Just fucking unplug. Find a corner of Reddit. Find a news service. There's several out there. I'm sure there's one ready for you. And again, all of this is the reason why tech companies are now moving out of the valley even faster than before. Sam Altman, president of Y Combinator, has argued that Silicon Valley PC culture is actually very bad for startups. It's so bad because dissent isn't a good thing. And they don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear anything about it. You don't fit in. You don't follow the party line. And they're tired of you. They don't want you. To be more accurate, headline: people in Silicon Valley are losing their minds after a famous investor said its culture is bad for startups. Sam Altman, one of the most powerful people in the startup world, says the debate about political correctness in San Francisco is bad for startups and smart people. His blog post drew heated reactions from those people who agree with him and from those who say his ideas are dangerous. The ideas had to be restricted, but that's counter to innovation. Specifically, restricting speech leads to restricting ideas and therefore restricted innovation. The most successful societies have generally been the most open ones. Usually mainstream ideas are right, heterodox ideas are wrong. It's a bit fluffy, but it just basically means going upstream. But the true and unpopular ideas are what drive the world forward. Apple used to actually do ads like that. They used to say, "We're the company that's not IBM."
Today we celebrate the first glorious anniversary of the Information Purification Directives. We have created, for the first time in all history, a garden of pure ideology, where each worker may bloom, secure from the pests, obeying contradictory thoughts. Our unification of thoughts is more powerful a weapon than any fleet or army on earth. We are one people, with one will, one resolve, one cause. Our enemies shall talk themselves to death, and we will bury them with their own confusion. We shall prevail.
On January 24th, Apple Computer will introduce Macintosh. And you'll see why 1984 won't be like 1984.
We actually enshrine genius and eclecticism. People that are a bit different. People who think different. Not anymore. Smart people have an allergic reaction to the restriction of ideas, and now I'm seeing many of the smartest people I know move elsewhere. The intellectual climate has now included pharmaceutical companies for intelligent augmentation, genetic engineering, and radical life extension. They don't want to hear it, and they don't sure as hell don't want to invest in it. So if you've got an idea, you might want to shop it elsewhere. Besides, you'll probably save $3,000 to $5,000 a month to live in a city where the homeless can legally shit on the sidewalk outside your front door. Anyway, some other footnotes for you. You may want to, again, check out the respective videos from Tim Ferriss, another former Silicon Valley refugee, as well as Dan Lyons, the aforementioned 50-plus-year-old who thought he could relive youth by hanging out with them. Then he discovered youth is overrated. This is the voice of Bob. Thank you for joining me. We've got a lot more to come. Take care, everyone.